recognize what they were saying came across. But I think this idea of feeling judged is pretty much universal. You know, there's these moments where we can choose to dwell or let it go. But this is kind of the thing that we're going to talk about today. So wherever we go as parents, people are out there noticing our kids. They're asking questions, they're making conversation, and they often do it in imperfect ways. We heard stories about us also speaking to others in imperfect ways. Before we were parents, the philosophies that we had about life, we could keep those inside. But when you have a child and you're out with them, suddenly those philosophies, people can see them. How you let your children dress or style their hair. If your child is going up the playground slide instead of down it, suddenly you're that parent who can tolerate unconventional behavior. Or dangerous. Or dangerous. Yes, the perils of the playground slide. You know, for me, I think back to, I started becoming interested in the Bradley method when I was 17 years old and I was a babysitter for a midwife. And when the kids were asleep, I would sit there and I'd read through her book. So I had these ideas about birth that were inside of me. No one had to know them. And then suddenly when I have kids and people start asking me these questions, this private belief I had is now out there for people to see, for people to talk on, to comment on, to judge. But sometimes they're just trying to make conversation and it just can feel like a lot. It can happen with strangers, but it can happen with people we know and love as well. So here's a scenario that someone shared with me, and Liz, it makes me think of your story that you've shared. So this woman wrote, I know two moms who have been friends for a decade or more. They had babies at the same time. Both were ambitious professionals, but one decided to stay at home and one decided to keep working. The one who stayed at home eventually sent her kids to a part-time crunchy preschool and became friends with the other parents there, adopting a particular philosophy. The other sent her kid to a full-time preschool program and mainly socializes with other working moms. This recently led to tension when their kids were playing at their house, and they had very different ideas about how to resolve a conflict that arose between the kids. They were old friends who suddenly had a new source of bad feelings toward one another. So, what do we do with this and the many points of contention when we fly our freak flag simply by existing as moms? And everybody deals with this, you know, no matter how mainstream or crunchy you are, suddenly all of these things are out there for people to see. When people ask us questions, or they give us comments, is it curiosity, or is it judgment? Is it a mommy war? Whatever way you decide it is, it makes us vulnerable. And vulnerability is not comfortable. It can set us on edge, it can make us feel defensive. And so it's not surprising when conflict does arise. Sometimes it's with the stranger making the comment, sometimes it's online, sometimes it's with the family member or the old friend. And we have to weigh, is this mommy wars or is this differences? Is this an attack against us or just a normal part of life? Growing. So as I heard our stories tonight, I heard stories of hurt feelings and conflict. But what I didn't hear is I didn't hear stories where people were saying, this group of women attacked me because of this decision, which is kind of what this idea of mommy wars is all about. But yet, this idea persists in media. So what's going on? I'll tell you, I've talked to many people. And as I prepared for MommyCon, I kind of opened it up. And I just said, if anybody has stories to tell me, will you tell me? And maybe it's just the people I know. But in person to person, I have yet to hear of people experiencing this mommy wars thing in person. So what's going on with this cultural phenomenon that we hear out there? So here's what I think. I think that ultimately, mommy wars is a stereotype that's perpetuated by the male-dominated media industry, and it's harmful to women. Now, it's not saying we don't have individual stories of pain and awkwardness, because we all do. But this idea that there's a cultural phenomenon of women attacking women is something I think we need to question. So the Women's Media Center reports that women comprise over 51% of the U.S. population, but they hold less than 7% of all TV and radio licenses. Overall, across print, television, and online, of all kinds of media outlets and news topics, men dominate the media. 63% to 36%. Now, where we do have representation of women is in lifestyle stories. There's about 50% of women in that. But women's voices in public policy is much lower. It's only about 1/3. So the Women's Media Center, as they've looked at what's going on with women in the media, women, being voices in the media, consumption, stories about women, what they have found is that a divide and conquer strategy has sold since the 1970s. So a classic modern example is this cover of Time magazine. Are you mom enough? Does anybody remember when this one came out? Yeah, and it was like, if you didn't know what attachment parenting was before that, or if you were practicing it and your friends and family didn't know, was a lot of questions in my world. But when media does this, be it news stories or the way that they advertise, and they raise division, it sells. Controversy raises defensiveness in us. And then our vulnerability raises its head. And then we're questioning our value. And then when we're feeling insecure, we can be sold to because we're seeking validation.
I downloaded that candle book.
So when we're feeling this way, we seek answers, ideas, products, stories on both sides. And when we're feeling insecure, it feels good to compare. Who am I doing better than? And we see a huge amount of media about women to this effect. So from Honey Boo Boo's mom to Jessa and Jill Duggar, the covers at every newsstand, it seems a lot like we're a culture that loves to hate on moms. Another thing that the Women's Media Center wrote is that it's easier for the media to titillate with mother-to-mother conflict than to address the real issues of motherhood in our culture. Namely, the abysmal culture of support that there is in terms of paid maternity leave, flexible schedules, and affordable childcare. Those are hard issues that there's no easy answers to. But what is it easier to talk about women in the media? Catfights? Or these issues that are so deeply ingrained in our society that they can't just sell news stories or be made up perfectly. There was something in that quote, the word titillate kind of struck me. Made me think of this idea of really mom shaming across the media. And a news story that came out not too long ago was about Harambe, the gorilla. People remember this. We're in mixed age company, so I'm not going to get into depth here, but quick overview is that social media and media exploded when a 3-year-old got into the gorilla enclosure and then was terminated. Now, I read things on Facebook like, I would never take that many kids to the zoo at once. How irresponsible. Well, good for you, okay. Or, this is why I put my child on a leash. People give me eye rolls, but see how right I am? This is us making sport of someone's misfortune, of a mother's misfortune. I see media outlets, they say things like, weigh in or spout off or log in and vote. Well, who benefits? I don't benefit. You don't benefit. They benefit. They get views for their ads, which generates them money. So the more controversial they can be, the better it is. If you've ever read the comment section of
anything online.
Oh my gosh, but especially in news articles, it is troll haven. I mean, people say the most terrible, horrible things. You know, I feel sorry for your children, you miserable human being. Okay, there's not respectful discourse happening. It's just like a giant hate fest. But when we see these things happen, it perpetuates this idea that women must be at war with women who believe different things. Interestingly enough, it's curious to think of how many of those trolls are actually women. I was reading something that the UN had put out about violence against women online, and the amount of male trolls is huge and really hateful. So media perpetuation of mommy wars does not say much for what, I hate to use this term because it sounds so like I'm a teenager, but the patriarchy. You know, it doesn't, but really, it doesn't say much for what they think about female culture. It pegs us as petty, as divided, as catfighting. It puts our interests into a small box. And when we spend our time on this sort of media, it can arise feelings of superiority in us, where we get out our emotions a little bit. Like, I'm feeling frustrated with these little people who I can't have a good conversation with, and they're so mad at me. So instead, I'm going to read this negative article, and then I'm going to feel superior, and then maybe I'm going to type something about it, or maybe I go talk to my friend about it. And instead of like dealing with our actual feelings, I think people use this as an emotional vice. I do this myself when I'm feeling stressed out. I'm like, let me go lock myself in my bathroom, take my phone, let me read an article, that's going to feel better. And it's not like roses and happy meditation. It's like, you know, usually sometimes it's like, oh man, that is so screwed up, and at least I'm not dealing with that. I'm making myself feel better at someone else's expense. Okay, so although I do think that in general, this idea of mommy wars is really a media perpetuated thing, the emotional ramifications of it are absolutely real. So the woman in the Harambe incident, she received death threats over this. She received death threats. And all I can think of is that this reflects the empathy deficit that we have in our culture. We forget that there's a human being on the other side of that screen. So, online harassment, absolutely a real thing. And I want to show you guys this other thing that's called the online wheel of abuse that a woman named Soraya Shamali devised. And it looks at this idea of what are the real life emotional ramifications. So tactics of online abuse are in orange. The yellow shows legal issues, and then the white are the impacts both practically and psychologically. So not only can we be involved in this, but as our kids get to an age where they're online, they are going to be in this culture as well. When you forget about the face of the person on the other side of the screen, you can really lose your humanity. I had written a piece for mothering.com, and I had one word of something that I had written. Somebody took offense at it. And so then they wrote their own article. They didn't put me in by name, but they linked, and I was kind of a straw man for the argument. And suddenly I saw my Facebook feed filled up with my friends sharing this article like, oh, isn't this article so great? Oh, isn't this article so great? And what they didn't realize was I was the straw man at the beginning. That one word of something I said had been taken out of context. And so as I go and read the comments now of this woman's thing that she had written, and I realized like these are such horrible things. So I decided to write a retort very politely. But it was amazing. This woman, it was easy for her on the internet. It's easy to take something that somebody else has done, vent about it, blow off steam, appropriate it, without realizing there's another human there. So the UN's report on cyber violence against girls and women has this to say. An emerging set of antisocial, aggressive, and violent content and behaviors are available to anyone who logs onto the internet. regardless of age, gender, culture, or values. Mobile internet access means that these can come at any time and can follow their targets everywhere. Abuse may be confined to network technologies or may be supplemented with offline harassment, including vandalism, phone calls, and physical assault. Similarly, the viral character of distribution is now explosive. What was once a private affair can now be instantly broadcast to billions of people across the digital world. So what this is showing us is that online abuse leads to offline abuse. Who we are on the computer is not an isolated version of ourselves. That is who we become, who we are in our day-to-day interactions. Lizzie, you're reading a book about kids and this, right? What is, and I know some of you are, okay, what?
You should never read this book.
Well, what is in case anybody is interested in crying over their book?
Media, social media.
American Girls, social media, something or another. It's by Nancy Jo Sales.
It's like, it's a woman who like went and interviewed girls in different age groups starting at 13 or 11.
There's only 200. She interviewed only 200 girls because it was making me crazy. Yeah. So it's.
But she went through and like she just found themes and saw what was happening, and you know, it's like really amazing. I mean, I feel like I really have no idea about that universe. You know what I mean? I mean, I just don't read comment sections, and I just don't. You know, I mean, I live in my little universe, and it just talks about how these kids. I mean, they're kids. Are like experiencing this whole thing and how it goes back and forth, and like
It's just
stuff that we can't talk about in this company.
Mature.
Yes.
Things that you would expect your like 25-year-olds to experience. Our children are experiencing secretly at like 12.
So something else, just kind of in this.
I'm sorry, Kim, what was the source for this?
Oh yeah, this
This
is.
would be good for the time.
Let me find the name for you. This is. It's from the Women's Media Center, and it's the Online Wheel of Abuse.
Okay.
So another phenomenon that I've noticed that plays into this idea of us feeling attacked came up recently. NPR posted something. Lori, I might have originally gotten it from you. A wonderful piece on NPR called "Why Do We Judge Parents for Putting Kids at Perceived but Unreal Risk?" Okay, so a couple people have read it. If you have
It's
not
open on a tab on my computer.
read it,
I was gonna say it's on my list.
It's just sitting
if
there.
you have not read it,
It's really good.
you have to read it. It's amazing. And then also, I checked, the full report is available if you Google the name or Calabria and go to University of California Press. You can get the entire study. But kind of what they do is it summarizes the study that University of California at Irvine did. There's a lot of amazing things in there, but the thing I want to focus on for this purpose is that they discuss something called the availability heuristic. I had to look that up on Wikipedia, so thank you Wikipedia for this definition. The availability heuristic is a mental shortcut that relies on immediate examples that come to a given person's mind when evaluating a specific topic, concept, method, or decision. Under the availability heuristic, people tend to heavily weigh their judgments toward more recent information, making new opinions biased towards the latest news. In other words, for those of us who are on social media, the things that come across our feed seem bigger because we've read them sooner. So there can be one small, crappy incident of something that happened, and when people repost that and repost that and repost that, and it comes across our feed 5 times, 10 times, this one sad, wrong situation seems bigger. And it colors our perception of things. Now, where these researchers went with it is this idea of we feel like there's danger, danger, danger towards children all the time. And typically that's perceived risk versus actual risk. And what happens is then we begin to moralize. And we judge other mothers for putting their children in danger because that's what we are seeing. We're seeing danger, 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 even though the danger is questionable. but it feels so real. And so when we're online and we have these perms and they know you're interested in something, it makes whatever it is seem bigger because it brings it to you more. Okay, so in the description of the talk, I promised 6 ways to show grace in the face of communication. Mommy wars conflict. So here's number 1. Tread carefully when you post online. Okay, so for one, there's this availability heuristic idea. So when you are retweeting the really, really cruddy article, you are bringing that to mind to people. So think carefully. Think carefully about this idea of raising awareness. What are you raising awareness to? Is it helpful or is it hurtful? But there's also a much bigger consequence, one that also applies to anyone that uses text messages or emails. We don't have tone or body language to soften our words. So how many people in here have ever misread or had someone misread the tone of something that you wrote? You know? In the professional world, it's the "we need to talk" email. Or like, I'm gonna die. You know, and then it's like, no, I wanted to tell you you're doing a great job. Well, then say it in other words. Okay, but it's so easy to misinterpret. So when we're in this situation with the written word, which is just a reality of our culture, I have to read that with grace. If something seems concerning, like, why is this person mad at me? Or are they mad at me? Or, ooh, why are they being such a jerk? Sometimes you gotta stop with the writing and call them. And clarify what's going on, because it's so easy for those things to escalate. And recognize people can misperceive us as well in writing. So whenever you're typing, imagine a real person at the end of the screen. And imagine that if you were the healthiest communicator you possibly could be, would you talk that way to your best friend, to your mom, or to your boss that way if you were sitting face to face? That's the care that we should use with the written word. Okay, strategy 2. Offer grace when someone says the wrong thing. And I heard a lot of stories around that, which I knew was going to be great coming to HMN. And I'm sure we've all been on the other end of this too, okay? Sometimes people say something the wrong way, or they ask an insensitive question. An obviously pregnant friend told me this story. So her coworker goes to her. Is it a boy or a girl? Oh, it's a girl. Her coworker tells her, I knew it. You did? Really? How did you know it? Well, when it's a boy, the weight is all in your belly, but when it's a girl, the weight just shows everywhere. You know? I mean, that's horrible. Or fast forward a few years. Won't people think your boy is a girl with hair like that? You know, like, or they've got to go the homeschool one. All the homeschool kids that I knew growing up were so awkward. You know, people, they say these things. They say these, oftentimes they're platitudes. It's like things you've heard a million times. You're not even surprised when you hear them. But people, they just say them without even realizing how horrible this thing is that they're saying. So, we just offer grace. So, if I say to offer grace, we have to think about what does grace even mean. So I think one thing that comes to mind is the idea of classiness, or the dictionary definition of simple elegance. And I like both of those definitions. You know, we can do that with our mouths. When someone has said something kind of jerky, we can respond gracefully. You know, picture Audrey Hepburn, or, you know, like whoever your like ultimate classy woman is, and that is going to come out of your mouth. And to do that, you may need to pause and take a deep breath. Now, mind you, not the passive-aggressive huff. I might have somebody in my life, my husband, who started doing this, and I'm like, you did not do this when we got married. Please stop with the passive-aggressive huff. You can take a deep breath if you need it. But I know what you're saying to me with that huff.
Now where's Audrey?
Yeah, where's Audrey? Exactly. In fact,
ask you for a mantra. That might be it.
That might be it. There you go.
Where's Audrey? Dig deep, find her.
Yes, yeah, but I can see her like in her pencil skirt. In pastoring, I present the idea of grace as undeserved merit or favor. So in this application, it means really you're giving the person more kindness than they deserve. You're just forgiving them in the moment and let it go, let it go. Assume good things about them beyond this moment. So you can hear someone warring with you, judging you, attacking you, or you can hear a person imperfectly trying to attempt conversation. And I heard a lot of stories that is where our hearts are. You can hear, yes.
I just have a thought.
You don't necessarily even have to change your words. I think it's about saying them figuring where your heart is when you say them. And so if you can say those words and it's from a snarky place, it's maybe learning to not respond. But that is a true, fair comment. And if you can say that sincerely from the heart, like, hey, I just want to clue you in on something. There's nothing inappropriate about what you just said. So.
That's so encouraging.
Oh, good. Thank you, Pam. So another thing that we can do is the idea for listen to her story. Now, goes for men too, but since we're kind of on the mommy wars idea, I went with the feminine. But here's the thing. The perspective that each one of us knows best in life is our own. And so the things that I say are colored by my experience, my joys and fears, my insecurities and pride, culture, and family history. I shared earlier about this idea of, shouldn't you try again to have a girl? You know, like that kind of thing. You know, this, oh, where's your girl? When I hear that, I can take it as a comment about me, or I can try to figure out what is this person's story. Okay, so if I apply this what is her story filter, some ideas come out, some possibilities. Maybe this person always wanted a boy and a girl. Or maybe this person comes from a culture where one sex is valued over the other. The one thing I can know for sure is that the comment is not about me, because how could it possibly be about me? This person doesn't know me. So ultimately, this is a comment about the other person and what their perspective is. Here's another iteration of the same idea. I know a mom, she worked for years to get pregnant. She wasn't sure it would be medically possible. She had many failed IVFs, and then it finally worked. We'll call her Beth, not her real name. But Beth had her little boy, and he is gorgeous, adorable, wonderful, you know, just everything you want for any parent, but especially a parent who's been through that. And he's not quite 2 yet, and people keep asking her, when are you going to have another child? So what she sees in him is that he's this once-in-a-lifetime miracle. And people have told her that she's being selfish for not having another child, that her little boy will grow up spoiled and lonely. Of course, those are not true things about her child. They have nothing to do with Beth's child. They have everything to do with the speaker and the speaker's perspective. And so when people say things like that to us, we can let them overtake our emotions. But it's not about us, even though it's been said to us. It's what is that person? What is her story? Maybe this person was lonely as a child or knew someone lonely. Or maybe this person has heard many stories about parents being selfish, and of course they don't know the full story to realize there's many, many things that make a child selfish, and how many children in a family is not the issue. Maybe this person is just feeling unheard in their life right now, and so they just want to say something to have conversation with someone, and so they're saying something that really is inappropriate, but they're just trying to engage you in some sort of conversation. Okay, so after you run the her story filter, what happens next? Really make it not about you. Okay, so you accept. I've tried to figure out something about this person. This conversation is not actually about me, and that is so freeing. When you realize this isn't about me, this is about this person, whatever they need, You don't have to defend yourself or explain your choices. You don't owe anybody an answer. But there are some things you can say back. To the invasive question, oh, why do you ask? Okay, that puts it back on the other person. They are either going to have to divulge something about their own story or admit that they're just being nosy. And usually when people admit that they're just being nosy, they might get a little like giggly and embarrassed and realize like, oh, that was really inappropriate. Or they might say something in their story that then you can respond to that need. And you don't have to give up any information about yourself unless you want to. Or their story might spark something in you that then you might want to divulge. Responding to a comment with, wow, it sounds like you have strong feelings about X, works really well. Again, you might be able to hear more of their story and then decide whether you want to offer more of yourself or not. But you don't owe anybody agreement or disagreement. Is very powerful. It can be said in many different tones. It can be pitying. It can be affirming. It can be disgusted. You just your answer away. And make it not about you has another element as well. Remember that this person is talking about her choice and not yours. So, for example, I'm staying at home so I can raise my own kids. Okay, when you're a working parent and you hear that, that feels really judgy. But you know what? It's about her. She is staying home so she can raise her own kids. Right? Good for her. Okay, and the flip side, I just don't understand what stay-at-home moms do all day. Well, guess what? She doesn't know what stay-at-home moms do all day. So just, make it, she's telling you about her. You don't have to make it about you.
Neither do the stay-at-home moms.
Yeah, no joke. Yes. Okay, next strategy. Oh, assume something else is going on. This applies to strangers as well as people we know. So you just never know, okay? The person who gives a harsh response who you know and you're like, what is going on? Like, this is a horrible comment. I had an incident, I was sitting at the mall, this woman was just like glaring at me while I'm nursing my toddler. And I could feel judged for nursing, or I could think like, that lady is lost in thought and her eyes just happen to land on my boob. So, you don't know. So I'm just gonna assume something else is going on. And sometimes, that with the eye contact and the little like, hi, do we know each other? Can disarm. But I think in general, especially as we shared our stories, people generally do not want to be horrible to each other. We're imperfect communicators. We're people who fail at communication. We fail at giving it, we fail at hearing it. And so we just assume something else is going on, that it's not about somebody hating on me or judging me. And then there's another great aspect to this. Attack problems, not people. And I don't know who originally said it, but it's a really great advice. It involves using I statements and feeling words instead of name calling. Okay. So what is this idea of the flash judgment? The flash judgment is the observation we make, okay? Whoa, that kid in that baby carrier is gigantic. Or, she took paid maternity leave, but now she isn't coming back to work. Okay, so we have these things that we observe. And then after that, it moves to an evaluation. Okay, so that kid should be walking on his own 2 feet. Or in the work situation, this lady is giving pregnant moms a bad name. Okay, so these are normal things to happen. We are people who observe things and judgments come to mind. This is different than being judgmental, okay? What happens is we have things to mind and then we choose what to do with it. Am I going to take this judgment and am I going to do something helpful with it, or am I going to do something hurtful with it? In the moment, am I going to speak out or keep quiet? And the right thing to do depends on the situation. Am I going to see something that's upsetting to me, and then the next mom's night out, I'm going to go and tell 10 people about this crazy jerky thing I saw? One of the something that just rubbed me wrong on social media was a mom who was breastfeeding in a restaurant, and an older woman went up to the employee and said she shouldn't be breastfeeding. And the employee said, we're not going to do anything about it. So what this mom did, who was nursing, is then she sat at her table and she took a selfie with the woman in the background, and then she posted it widely on social media. Now, yeah, this woman was not being friendly to her. And as a breastfeeding mom, like, know the laws, support other women. You know, so like on the one hand I get it, but this is someone's mom, someone's grandma. This is a real person. That woman didn't learn anything that day. And it's not our job to be educators unless we feel called, you know, to, through kindness, help someone. But if we stop at evaluation and we let our actions or our word vomit come out at that, then we're not doing the helpful thing. We're doing the hurtful thing. So a great step to do after this is to insert some grace. Assume that others have good intentions, just like you typically have good intentions. And then insert curiosity or a genuine well-wish. So, that toddler-wearing mom must know something about baby wearing that I don't. Boom, you've got grace, you've got humility. I wonder why she finds a carrier helpful at this age. Curiosity. Or, you know, I guess my coworker must have made the best decision she could. Grace. I hope that she finds fulfillment in her new path. A genuine well-wish. Now, yes, okay, and let's be clear, not everything that people do is okay, right? Like, there are genuinely damaging, destructive, abusive things that people do, and then we have to figure out, you know, how to work in that situation. But that's different that I'm talking about here. And it also is interesting to think about that NPR article and that study that I talked about earlier. Culturally, we seem to have an issue with knowing what really is dangerous. And so even though I feel like something is dangerous, and so I think, oh, that is actually dangerous, I should actually speak up. Okay, so that's a really tough line. And so that's one reason I encourage you all to go and read this article or the full study, just as a kind of a litmus test for your own perceptions of when it is to speak up. There's a lot of people passionate about car seat safety, right? Car seats are awesome. Like, I'm not saying they're not, but there are people who will see something in a car, you know, that they think is wrong with the car seat and call the police. And so that's something else that this NPR and study piece gets into is incidents where CPS has been called over perceived danger situations. So I think as we all seek not to be sanctimommies, we need to do a litmus test of our perception of danger in others. And then when it truly is dangerous, you can do that in love, in the context of a relationship when possible. So in this study, one of the things it talked about was particularly women judging women. So the women who did the study, they thought they would find women would have more grace, mothers would have more grace for other mothers. After all, they've been in the trenches, they know how crazy it is, and what they found was completely the opposite of that. And so it put this idea in mind of kind of this looking for the bad mommy to punish. That's what this media idea of mommy wars is all about. Or frankly, looking even just for bad women, right? That's tabloid fodder. That is celebrity gossip fodder. And we do not have time to get much into this topic today, but here's some questions to think about, and I'm just going to speak a little bit on this topic before we move on. So any look at a magazine rack is going to give us an opportunity to analyze the clothes, the state of the uterus, weight gains and losses, relationship fails of celebrities. When we indulge in this kind of thing, it can make us feel curious, but it can also get back to the idea of giving me something to feel superior to. It can make me feel distant from my own life, my own problems. When someone feels distant from us, it can make us feel like judging them isn't such a big deal. They deserve it a little bit for me to compare. We get in the habit of consuming the failures of others as a culture. And this conditions us into some pretty unhealthy habits, which then in turn happens with our kids. And this also happens to the degree of we're walking along and we see someone dressed in a certain way. And I may say like, whoa, she's practically naked. Well, suddenly I just modeled for my children. We evaluate the clothes of others. And when we're doing that to other women, we can do it with anybody, but we're modeling and we're getting ourselves in this habit of, I get to critique others, I get to critique others, I get to critique others. And it creates a habit in us. However, when we dial that back and we work on just having the flash judgment and letting it go, then we can retrain our brains to not be so judgmental. And that's the amazing thing, is that the less judgmental I am, the less I feel judged. And when I'm triggered into something and I'm looking for that emotional outlet, usually I feel more judged as well. It's fascinating to me when I kind of like feel my own radar on that. Okay, strategy 6. Don't be a pleaser. It's okay to be wrong. So no choice you are going to make will ever please everyone, and that's okay. Because you can be wrong in someone else's eyes and just walk away from it. In face-to-face conversations, we have chances for healthy conversation with those whose perspectives we truly value. It can be a dialogue. Back and forth clears things up so quickly. We can have clarifications in the midst of that. We can soften our tone or our body language. But when we don't utilize those things, whether it's written communication or just the casual encounter with a stranger or random person who says something, trying to prove your point can be futile. So when is it worth caring what other people think? I would suggest pick your top 2 or 3 people. The people who you can confess your biggest failures to, and they'll love you anyway. The people who show up for you again and again. And when you're feeling judged about something, or you're weighing, should I give in, should I try this other way? That's the person who it's worth fighting it out with, in healthy ways. That's the person it's worth getting into the messy discussion with. But outside of that, you don't owe anybody anything. It's okay to be wrong in those people's eyes. So these 2 or 3 people, it could be good friends, it could be a mentor, it could be a counselor, it could be your parents or in-laws, or maybe not. Everybody has different dynamics, so it can be any of those people. And if you don't have someone like that in your life, that's a great goal to set. And I sincerely, we talked about like mental health earlier, jokingly, but really, if you're really feeling bogged down by feeling judgmental or feeling lonely because of it, counseling is a great way to have somebody who's going to be on your team who you can talk things out with. I don't know if anybody else loves Brene Brown. Yes, I love her. So she's a shame and vulnerability researcher. She's written several books that are all fantastic. And here's what she says in Daring Greatly. When we stop caring about what people think, we lose our capacity for connection. When we become defined by what people think, we lose our willingness to be vulnerable. If we dismiss all the criticism, we lose out on important feedback. But if we subject ourselves to the hatefulness, our spirits get crushed. It's a tightrope. Shame resilience is the balance bar, and the safety net below is the 1 or 2 people in our lives who can help us reality check the criticism and the cynicism. So, we got to our 6 ideas. We have 10 minutes left, so I have a couple of things we can do. One, we can just talk, or I can give you guys a couple of kind of exercises, games to do, or if people are people familiar with I feel statements and the way that that works in conflict. Okay, I see a lot of nods. We'll kind of go quickly through it just in case. Okay, so top people, we talked about that. Okay, so a great way to assert yourself is to say when you state the problem behavior, this is the idea of the observation, and then I feel because. So in the context of conflict, I have a couple of examples. When you say homeschooled kids are awkward, I feel angry because I think my kids are delightful. Or think about, I was thinking about putting myself in the mind of a friend who has a lot of hard times with people who say breast is best because she tried really hard to nurse her daughter and it just didn't work. So I was kind of envisioning her, what she might say. And she might say, when you say breast is best, I feel frustrated because I was miserable nursing. It wasn't best for my family. Yeah.
Yes, that one is for me.
So specifically, okay, there's a book, Deborah Tanneman. She's a professor at Georgetown, my alma mater.
I saw her speak.
Did you? She's I've never heard her speak, but I've read her books.
Yeah.
You spell, please.
I saw her speak.
Tanneman. So she is a communications researcher. Like, this is her field. So the one that was extremely helpful for me is called You're Wearing That, Mothers and Daughters in Communication, which is the best title ever.
But I never read it.
Because it's like, you're wearing that versus, oh, you're wearing that. So it's perfect. So she really looks into this. And I don't remember that she was like, here's a 1, 2, 3 guide to solutions. But it was so helpful in changing how I was as a listener. To listen to really what the person was saying and realize, like, okay, maybe this conversation isn't as judgmental as I thought. Okay, but then there are the times where it really is as judgmental as you think. So this, so I think this strategy, and you're saying, so you'll say this, you'll say how you feel, they'll dismiss your feeling. Okay, so then you have to, so then that's when you're looking into things like, what do I do in a toxic relationship? Or that's the kind of thing maybe you talk through with a counselor. But really, it's, because people dismissing your feelings, that's really when you need to have, boundaries in a relationship.
Oh no, I mean that's the thing.
You're doing all of that. There's no magic bullet.